Seen recently, the GFL came out with their draft, PFL dropped Bellator, and bare knuckle boxing's been popping off. Pretty much everything outside the UFC has been having big news lately. So I took it upon myself to think, man, a lot of these fighters are growing in a lot of popularity outside of the UFC. Let's make a little pound for pound list of all of these fighters that are outside of the UFC, maybe even previously with the UFC, but I just thought it'd be interesting. And I will say, as I was going through and making this list, I am not jealous of anyone who has to make pound for pound lists. I switched around the order of these and a couple switch out of who's in the list a few times, and it was not easy. Not easy. I will just say that. And to reveal our list here, we got our fantastic GFL AI images. My favorites here actually were the Holly Holm stank face. They did her. They showed her I think twice in the promo. The first time was pretty normal. The second time they just gave her a straight stank face. I don't know what that was all about. And then we got the Gegard Mousasi over here with the craziest face I've ever seen. I love it. I love it so much. So we're going to go ahead and get into the list. We'll go through our top 10 first, and I'll give some honorable mentions that almost made the cut that I was just a little on the fence about. Didn't know how to approach it. So let's go and get right into it. For our first one, we have Corey Anderson at light heavyweight. So this one was a bit of a tough one to figure out who do I put at the bottom, but I thought to myself, you got to think about the win streak he was on prior to leaving the UFC. Patrick Cummings, nothing too crazy. Glover Teixeira, Ilir Latifi, not too bad, and Johnny Walker. That's a pretty good 4-fight win streak. Right before that, or right after that, losing to Jan Blachowicz with a right hook. It was a very, very nasty one too. He went out cold. From there, though, going on a 3-fight win streak, losing to Vadim Nemkov, which is obviously not a bad loss, and then getting his title back by the end against Carl Moore and Bellator. Now hanging in the air, not really knowing what he's doing. Been shouting out PFL to try and get him a fight, but there's been no communication on it. A lot of people been very angry at the PFL lately who have not been fighting, including the Patricio Pitbull as well. But that's going to be our number 10 spot right there. I think that's a pretty decent one. I mean, you've seen him do really well even in the fights he's lost. And I think toward the end of his UFC stint, a light switch like kind of kicked off, and he really started approaching his matchups differently. And also has a win over Dovlet Yagshimuradov, who beat Impa Kasaganai recently. Very, very good win to have before he beat Ryan Bader. So not bad wins at all. So that's our number 10 pick. Number 9, we have Sergio Pettis. Great flyweight, bantamweight. I don't know why I put flyweight. He's a flyweight and a bantamweight. Most recently fighting at bantamweight. Great record. A little on and off. Has a lot of rematches here and there. But just listen to this, when he started his title, and before that, his last fight in the UFC, getting the win over Tyson Nam. But going forward, and that was in the flyweight division. And before that, he had lost a couple fights in the bantamweight division, and then decided he would, that cut wasn't going to be doing him any good anymore. So decided to move on, go on to bigger and better things in other organizations at bantamweight. But as he started his title run, Juan Archuleta, Kyoji Horiguchi, and Patricio Pitbull. I mean, those are 3 great title wins to have outside of the UFC. Those are some of the who's who. Would have thought Hoffy and Stotts too, and that would have been the cherry on top for that win streak. But the reason why I had to kick him down a bit lower is because following that, loses his title to Patchy Mix. I mean, you can't blame him there. That's a well-aged loss there. And then loses in the rematch to Kyoji Horiguchi in the decision unanimously. So, got to kick him down a little bit lower, but he's highly skilled. The knockout over Kyoji Horiguchi in their first fight was insane. As Kyoji was ducking under the head kick, Sergio kept spinning into the spinning back fist and put him out, and that was an insane knockout, an all-time knockout there. But we got Sergio Pettis at number 9. Next up, at number 8, we have Kyoji Horiguchi. the man, the myth, the legend, the guy who's been everywhere, fought everybody. You know, this guy has been all around mixed martial arts in Bellator, the UFC, and Ryzen, and also has pretty good records, only really losing again to the who's who, you know, losing to Kaya in terms of like the last few like 5 years, only losing to Kaya Sakura, Sergio Pettis, and Patchy Mix. But the fact that he got that Sergio Pettis win back and defended titles in Ryzen, that's why he gets one bump up against Sergio Pettis for me. And also the skills in general are just really, really good. So we gotta, and also don't forget, even when he lost to Kaya Sakura, got the KO TKO in the rematch to make up for it. So just saying, that's big stuff. Okay, let me see. Was there any other yeah, like just so many names. Oh, can't even forget. Also beat Manel Cap early on in his career when Manel Cap was just an 11-1 fighter. Okay, so Kyoji Horiguchi has got to get on this list. Okay, that's an easy pick right there. All right, moving on to number 7. Number 7, who's it gonna be? Vadim Nemkov. Vadim Nemkov is our number 7 pick. I actually had him much higher before I decided that it wasn't a good idea to have him in like that top 3 range, just because the talent that he's faced has been good, not bad. It's been pretty decent, you know. He beat Phil Davis early on in his career when Phil Davis was only 19-4. All right, that's a great win. Beat Ryan Bader to get his title. Defended against Phil Davis again after that. Julius Angelikas after that, and then beat Corey Anderson to defend, and then Yoel Romero. Now those are great wins. Ryan Bader in 2020 is much better than beating Ryan Bader now. Hence why you don't see a certain other heavyweight who's beaten Ryan Bader recently on this list. But for me, since Corey Anderson's kind of at that bottom of that pound for pound list, and also you're taking Yoel Romero to a decision when he's 45, I feel like that's a fight he should have been able to finish. If I'm being honest, I know Yoel is a time bomb waiting to explode with a lot of power on people, but it's a little disappointing to not see him get that finish. But the reason why I still have him here and was close to putting him higher is because I think he's seeing himself more and more as a heavyweight. I think he's seeing Jailton Almeida and Sergey Spivak, guys that usually fight around 240, having massive success at heavyweight. And I could see him inching up more and more up this pound for pound list if he really starts to get going on his heavyweight run. Just a fun fact, one of his 2 losses, Yuri Prohashka, and this was back when Vadim Nemkov was weighing in at 219 pounds. Now, in his last fight against Tim Johnson, weighing in at 242 pounds. So I could see Vadim, out of everyone on this list, I could see Vadim Nemkov moving the most out of everybody. So Vadim Nemkov, great fighter, great grappling. Yeah, it's just really excellent. Actually, great all around, you know. Finished Ryan Bader with a head kick. You know, that's good stuff. All right, moving on. Number 6, we have Dakota Decheva, our first female fighter to make the list. Okay, our only female fighter on the top 10 pound for pound. I was close to putting Larissa Pacheco, simply because of the win over Kayla Harrison, but I was trying to keep it to more of the weight classes we have in the UFC, and I'm not even sure Larissa Pacheco can make that 135 weight. I'd have to check up on that, because if so, maybe I'd modify this list a bit. Maybe I would, maybe I'd kick Corey off and stick Pacheco there at the number 10 spot. But Dakota Decheva with a excellent record of 14-0 outside of the UFC, and that Tyler Santos win, that the way, not only the level of opponent that Tyler Santos won, championship level opponent, the way she beat her was brutal finish, and was mixing up the targets up and down, and it was absolutely beautiful. If you haven't watched it, please go watch the Dakota Decheva fight versus Tyler Santos. it was an incredibly impressive showing of skill, and I'm glad she's kind of sticking around for the PFL. You know, I think that makes this. I think it makes the sport more fun when we have all of our talent, especially the really good talent that like Dakota could step into a title fight right now if she wanted to. I'm glad that it's kind of spread out. It makes the competition a bit more fun to watch. So Dakota Dacheva coming in at number 6, very well earned, in my opinion, very well earned. This next one, I'm a little conflicted, but I had to be objective. Had to be objective. Number 5, we got Johnny Eblin. The reason why I'm so upset is because I'm a big Impa Kansaganai fan. After that Buckley knockout, you wanted your boy Impa to come back and really surge and flourish outside of the UFC, which he did. He was on a great run, having a lot of success at 205 actually, before running into Johnny Eblin and getting robbed, in my opinion. It was a great close fight, fantastic fight, incredibly entertaining, but in my opinion, he was robbed. He was robbed. But Johnny Eblin is a force. He's got excellent grappling. He's a very well-rounded fighter, but the grappling is where he shines, and he's got that pace, that cardio pace that seemed very Colby Covington, but a lot more effective, in my opinion. A lot more effective. But Johnny Eblin has got a pretty good record, too, in terms of like when you saw how he won his title against Gegard Mousasi, which is an insane amount of experience to go against. It's never going to be an easy fight. Fighting Anatoly Tokov, who was 31-3 at the time, also an incredible challenge of experience there. In fact, who was Tukov fighting to get to that point at the time? Before that, Tukov was fighting guys with insanely experienced records, like a lot. Like he went against a 57-11 guy at one point, and 25-7 guy. Like this was a guy that had a ton of experience. I think this guy who was 66-15 recently and lost though, Alexander Shlemenko. Anyways, back to our boy Johnny. Yeah, and after beating Anatoly Tokov, beating Fabian Edwards the first time by finish, then winning the split decision against Impa, who had been going crazy against guys at a weight class above him, so that was incredibly impressive. And then another title fight against Fabian Edwards, which he won as well. So for me, the undefeated record, the momentum, the coming back from adversity in the Impa fight, that puts you pretty high up on the list for me. So he gets the number 5 spot. I'm not going to be salty about it anymore. I hope he comes to the UFC eventually. I think he'd mix in well with a lot of these guys. But let's move on to number 4. Number 4, we have Alexander Shabli, a guy that probably a lot of people forgot about, honestly. Went against Usman Nurmagomedov most recently back in September, and in a very competitive fight. Lost the unanimous decision, but showed like he is that championship level. But Usman is just that much better. A lot of criticism of Shabili is he's more of a counter striker. He more waits and bides his time to find that shot, but incredibly skilled. The striking is at such a high level, and the fight looked a lot like the Paul Hughes Usman fight in terms of how competitive it was, but Shabli just was not able to put that forward pressure and that pace that Paul Hughes was able to put on. The calculated pressure that Paul Hughes was putting on Usman was just completely different than what Shabli was able to bring to that. But the skills speak for himself. And that's honestly why he gets such a high spot on this list. I know this is probably going to be the most controversial one out of all of them. Just because Johnny and Dakota and Vadim have, and honestly the guys under have probably accomplished so much, but if you're making a pound for pound list and you got to look at skills, he gave Usman one of his hardest fights. He just did. He had a moment where he even hurt Usman a little bit. Not a lot of guys are able to do that, so I mean we got to put him there. And he's got great wins going from Brent Primus to Tafik Musayev, and then Patricky Pitbull. And then losing in the close fight against Usman. So that's probably my most controversial placement there. Just because he's been on ice recently, and I think there's a lot that he can offer that, quite frankly, they're just not putting him to use, which is incredibly disappointing. I hope he hasn't been injured recently or anything like that. And because they did have a bout scheduled for Usman and him originally before their actual fight that canceled because of Usman getting injured. So hopefully it's nothing on his end. Hope to see Shabli here back soon though. Next we're moving on to Patchy Mix at number 3. Patchy Mix, probably the hottest bantamweight prospect at the moment. I can't even really call him a prospect. I guess UFC prospect if you want to say that. But insane skills. This guy's grappling is dangerous. He is also just well-rounded, okay? And the who's who of like outside of the UFC kind of bantamweight fights that he's gone through. Like, listen to this. James Gallagher, Kyoji Horiguchi, Rafian Stotts, Sergio Pettis, Magomedov, and I actually skipped in between Kyoji Horiguchi and Rafian Stotts. He fought Magomedov the first time, okay? And then had to beat him again later in a split decision that was incredibly close that some people thought Patchy lost. I have to go back and really score that fight. It's been a while since I've seen it. But, I mean, again, it's that same kind of Johnny Iblin example of coming back from adversity from an opponent who's felt you before and kind of knows what they need to adjust for the next one, and he still won. So I think that's incredibly impressive. The fact that 2 of the 4 losses on Magomed's record is Patchy Mix probably eats him up. I gotta say, that probably eats him up. But I think Patchy's also having that the same issues with not getting any fights. He got kicked off of the most recent card with Usman and Paul Hughes. I don't know what they're gonna do with him. I hope they get him a fight soon because the UFC or somebody rising, I don't know. It's not looking good so far. I hope they get my man a fight soon. I haven't heard any news recently, but Patchy Mix is a fantastic fighter. I think he could walk into any fight in the top 10 and have an excellent chance of winning that fight. But yeah, so we're gonna move on to number 2, and I think people have kind of used process of elimination of who I've put at number 2 and 1. But let's go and get to number 2. Paul Hughes. Paul Hughes. Not the most extensive record, you know, not a huge breadth of experience, but what he showed in that Usman Nurmagomedov fight, it to me was as impressive as Volkanovski's performance against Islam Makhachev in the first fight, but honestly, even more for me, because the composure, the durability, the things that are outside of like the skills aspect of fighting are just at another level. And this is a guy who's gone through so many brutal injuries in terms of like how many times he's broken his hand, and he explains it as just kind of going into a place of not caring about any of that and none of that affecting him at all and just pushing forward toward his goal. And he was not wrong in his post-fight interview. He absolutely had gas in the tank, and if he wasn't, he was having a ton of fun in the fight, and in moments, I think that played against him. And I think he let some moments get away from him where he could have been working. But I think he was having so much fun and enjoying how much success he was having. It maybe slipped away from him, but the takedown defense, the counters, the body shots, oh my gosh, the hooks to the body that this man can throw. He is a dangerous, dangerous man. I do not envy anyone who has to fight Paul Hughes in the future, because that is a dangerous dude. He is tough, very tough, and the skills are very high, as we saw in the recent fight with him and Usman. With that being said, though, we got to get to our number 1 pick, and I think we all know. It is Usman Nurmagomedov. Yeah, no, it's kind of undeniable. The guy is a complete package, probably not the strongest grappler. His technique is incredible whenever he does get on top. I think he showed that in the Shabli fight, especially in that 5th round after he hurt Shabli. The way he was able to control and not let Shabli like get up after that. He was just using a lot of great tools throughout that fight, and was able to get down Paul Hughes a couple times with some very well-timed takedowns. But in terms of the strength of his grappling, that's probably where Paul Hughes was able to get really good sprawls and recover. And he had, Paul Hughes is very fast himself. But luckily the technique, the timing, the speed of Usman is so good. He doesn't need to require too much on the strength. He uses a lot of good trips from the backside body lock. He's just got so many good takedowns. So many good takedowns. So yeah, it's Usman Nurmagomedov, and much like his brother Umar, that lead leg, both of his legs really are absolutely dangerous. The combinations of starting with the hands, ending with the kick, anyone can get caught like that. And that's why I'm also a little worried about this is a very weird sidebar, but a guy like Vinicius Oliveira who keeps his hand down, who slips out of the way side to side, he easily could get caught by something like that. It's an incredibly skilled fighter. Different weight class, but you get the idea. Usman could fight anybody. He could fight anybody. He has that kind of style. But a guy like Paul Hughes, who is willing to move forward and make Usman back up, that's how you're gonna beat him. And Paul Hughes showed that. So who knows? Usman could get knocked off of this number one spot, either by consequence of getting into the UFC or by losing in a rematch to Paul Hughes. But right now, he is still the king. He is still the king of the pound for pound division outside of the UFC. That being said, let's get into our Gegard Mousasi honorable mentions. And of course, in the honorable mentions, if you're going to have Gegard covering it, you got to have Gegard in the honorable mentions. So we have Gegard, Francis, Impa, and Hernan Ferreira. It was the reason why I didn't want to put Francis into the top 10 is because we kind of know he's in that top 10, but Francis has kind of elevated into this otherworldly figure where he's knocking down heavyweight champions in boxing, and I don't even want to kind of try to fit him in because to me he's in his own little category. He's in his own category of greatness. We don't need to mix him in with the plebes, the plebs. But outside of that, Gegard, like I said earlier, for the breadth of his experience, Impa Kansaganai, even though he lost his last fight at 205 to Dovlet, like I was saying earlier, the fact that he is a natural 185er and the way he's beating these 205ers and how good of a fight he put up against Johnny Eblen, you got to put him in the honorable mention. Sadly, he doesn't have the accomplishments for me to put him past a Corey Anderson or a Sergio Pettis, or necessarily the skills to put him past those guys. I mean, he's worth a mention. The guy, the way he has come back from getting the most embarrassing viral knockout of all time to getting to the point where he is now is nothing but impressive. And another heavyweight that I wanted to mention, because he has made a lot of accomplishments. He was the one lone guy on the PFL Bellator card. PFL versus Bellator card to win that night. The one PFL guy that night to win. So I thought about the pressure he must have been under seeing all of the PFL guys lose. It's like, oh, I mean, he did have probably the easiest matchup out of all of them against Ryan Bader, but to get the knockout he got, I thought that was really impressive. I thought he should at least get a shout, and he stepped in there against Francis Ngannou, and he made an attempt, got knocked out. It's Francis Ngannou. What are you going to do? But the reason why he's not getting this is because he lost to Fabricio Verdum. He did. He tapped in that triangle and then proceeded to, finish Fabricio on top, which was, even if he didn't tap, if he did get out of that legitimately, that ground and pound was still impressive. But even still, for me, that doesn't get you anywhere near my top 10. You get a shout. You get a shout. But other than that, what do you guys think I got right? What do you guys think I got wrong? Who am I leaving off this list? Who doesn't even belong on this list, in your opinion? Please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. And I'll be seeing you all soon. Hopefully, we'll be streaming some local regional MMA, the UFC card this weekend for Adesanya versus Imavov. But I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.